The quiet inside the church felt dense enough to press against my ribs. We stood beneath towering stone arches in downtown Boston, surrounded by executives in tailored black suits and polished shoes. This wasn't just a funeral, it was a gathering of power. But my sister-in-law, Lauren, wasn't there to grieve. She was there to take control. Before the minister could finish the final blessing, she strode forward and seized the microphone. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor, and her voice rang out with confidence that felt wildly out of place. She announced that my brother, Michael, would be stepping in as the new head of our billion-dollar freight and infrastructure company. She smiled broadly, scanning the room, waiting for applause. Instead, a strange sound rolled through the cathedral's speakers. A short, dry laugh, deliberate and unmistakable, echoed from near my father's casket.
People gasped.
Michael froze. It wasn't a ghost. It was a recording. But the fear on my brother's face was very real. To understand why my father was laughing from beyond the grave, you need to rewind a few minutes. Michael and Lauren had been treating the service like a corporate gala. They weren't mourning a man. They were networking for a future they assumed was guaranteed. From my seat near the front, I watched Michael clasp hands with board members, accepting condolences that sounded more like congratulations. Lauren leaned toward donors and whispered about redesigning offices, critiquing the stained glass windows as if they were mood boards. They barely acknowledged me. To them, I was part of the furniture. Michael leaned close at one point, straightening a tie worth more than my monthly mortgage. "Don't worry, Claire," he murmured. "We'll find you something simple to do. Maybe records management. Someone has to handle the dull work while leadership makes decisions." He smiled when he said it, like it was generous. He believed his birth order made him invincible. He thought entitlement was the same as competence. I didn't argue or cry. I felt something colder settle in, focus. Across the aisle sat Thomas, my father's longtime operations director. He had been with the company since before I was born. In his hand was a small remote. I caught his eye and nodded once. That was all it took. Thomas stood, walked calmly to the back of the cathedral, and turned the lock on the heavy doors. The sound carried through the room. Then he raised the remote and aimed it at the large screen behind the altar, which everyone assumed was there for a memorial slideshow. The screen lit up. Instead of childhood photos or fishing trips, my father appeared, seated behind his desk, shoulders squared, eyes sharp. He looked exactly as he had during boardroom interrogations. The recorded laugh played again, louder this time, cutting through the stunned silence. Michael's victory lap ended right there. As the congregation turned toward the screen, my thoughts drifted far from the church. They went to frozen loading docks at dawn, emergency calls at midnight, and rail yards soaked in sleet. While Michael chased prestige at global conferences and charity races, I spent years untangling labor disputes and rerouting shipments to keep hospitals stocked. I missed weddings. I spent birthdays in data centers fixing breaches before anyone noticed a problem existed. I told myself skill would eventually outweigh blood. I believed results mattered more than titles. So I stayed quiet. I fixed things. I saved millions. I convinced myself silence was professionalism. What I didn't realize was that silence is often mistaken for permission. By staying invisible, I let them erase me. They treated my work like infrastructure, essential, unnoticed, and taken for granted. You don't praise a foundation. You just assume it will hold. They thought I was submissive. They didn't realize I was observant. Every slight, every stolen credit, every reckless decision Michael made while I cleaned up the aftermath, it was all logged. Not just by me. My father had been watching too. 3 days earlier, before the funeral plans were even finalized, Michael and Lauren stormed into headquarters. The coroner had barely left our father's house. Thomas and I were already there, managing investors and stabilizing markets. Michael didn't ask about employees or funeral arrangements. He ran his hand across my father's desk and declared it outdated. Lauren was already calling a designer, talking about lounges and rooftop access. When Thomas mentioned pension concerns and contracts, Michael laughed and told him his time was over. Then Michael turned to me, grabbed the shipping reports from my hands, and tossed them aside. "We need charisma," he said. "You're good at the boring stuff. Stick to that." They talked about selling assets to fund a European villa. They saw the company as a wallet, not a responsibility. I didn't argue. I just picked up the papers. That was when the plan began. Back in the cathedral, my father's recorded voice filled the room. He addressed Michael directly, calmly dismantling a decade of reckless spending. The screen shifted to detailed financial records, failed ventures, personal indulgences, vanity projects, all documented. He explained that what Michael believed were gifts were, in fact, loans. Loans Michael never bothered to read the paperwork for. Then came the contract, a clause that transferred ownership if a debt threshold was crossed. Michael crossed it months ago. The final slide showed a bank transfer clearing the debt in full. My name was on it. My father's voice softened only once when he addressed me. He told me where the keys were. He told me to do what needed to be done. When the screen went dark, Lauren turned on Michael with fury. The truth hit her instantly. She hadn't married power. She'd married liability. Michael rushed toward me, panicked, pleading, insisting family meant immunity. I handed him an envelope. Termination papers. Access revoked. A repayment schedule. No shouting. No drama. Just process. Walking out of the church felt lighter. Thomas held the car door for me, the same way he'd done for my father for decades. This time it was my turn to lead. I didn't feel vindictive or guilty. I felt resolved. The empire wasn't inherited. It was earned.